Ed Robertson, and this is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast, where I introduce you to some of the innovative and creative individuals who are shaping the future of the American West. I meet most of these people through my work in ranch brokerage and land conservation, or through my hobbies and interests that revolve around spending time up high in the mountains. My guests include ranchers, writers, entrepreneurs, conservationists, athletes, artists, adventurers, pretty much anyone who's doing important work and has an interesting story to tell. My guest today is Adam Foss. Adam is a world-class hunter who's transformed his passion for wildlife and wild places into a rewarding career in filmmaking and photography. Adam has been obsessed with wilderness adventure for practically his entire life. At age 24, he was the youngest person to take all 4 species of North American sheep with a bow, an amazing achievement for a hunter of any age. But despite this accomplishment and others, Adam is much more focused on the process of the hunt, spending long, challenging days in the mountains, forming long-lasting friendships, stewarding public lands, and conserving legendary big game species. Adam was born in the Canadian Rockies and spent his youth bow hunting with his father and older brother. As he grew older, his hunting trips expanded in geography and complexity, and he has now hunted many of the world's wildest places for some of the most renowned big game. Adam initially considered a career in wildlife biology, but decided to go the creative route instead. He and his wife are now the owners of Foss Media, a company that creates film and photography for some of the most iconic outdoor brands today. As you'll hear, Adam is passionate about wildlife storytelling and conservation, but he's equally humble, grounded, and grateful to be doing what he loves on a daily basis. Adam and I caught up over Skype as he and his wife are currently moving around Canada and the American West working on creative projects. We had a fun conversation and managed to cover a lot in just over an hour. We discussed Adam's childhood in Canada and the lessons he learned from hunting with his father and brother. We chatted about how Adam values the process of hunting over the end goal of taking an animal, and we discussed our shared theory that hunting taps into something primal in our human DNA. We talked in detail about conservation, specifically the role that public lands play in hunting in both the United States and Canada. Adam also offers some wise advice to those who want to learn to hunt, but may not have a long-standing connection to the sport. And as usual, we discuss favorite books, films, and Adam's most powerful outdoor experience. This was such a fun conversation, and it's clear that Adam has thought long and hard on many of these issues. I really enjoyed getting to know Adam, and I think you will too. When you meet somebody for the first time and you've never met them and they ask you that question, what do you do? How do you answer them?
Mm-hmm. It's changed over the years. When people ask what I do, I usually say my wife and I are owners and operators of a production company that's primarily based in film, short film for hunting and fishing brands in the outdoor space, and as well as still photography for the same kind of clients. And I think we kind of pride ourselves on being content creators, but also content strategists, and because we've worked in the area for a number of years, and with a lot of really cool brands that have evolved and sort of pushed the envelope of what the activity of hunting and fishing and what it means to be outdoors focused, and even issues like conservation and public land and that sort of thing. We kind of like to think of ourselves as on the forefront of that as well. So sort of strategizing with brands to help tell those stories that are going to be impactful and on point with where their company's headed, and also lining up our own values with those unique stories that we're really lucky that we get to sink our teeth into things that matter to us, and fortunately there's companies out there that share the same values, and we can kind of work together to craft whether it's a film project or a photography project, written copy or whatever it is, we can kind of craft along with them to create something pretty special and impactful. And usually when I answer that question, it's hopefully less than, the 90 seconds it took me to spit that out. But, I think for us, it's just about being more than just pressing the red button on the camera and delivering a project. It's we kind of get pretty invested in whether it's the characters that we're creating these films around, in their lives, or, with the people that are pushing the direction of the brand. Like we get we sink our teeth in pretty good, and we like to have that back end of a project to be successful. It's got to have the the distribution and the thought behind what this is going to be and where it's going to go. And so anyone can sort of not anyone, but the space has evolved to, there's a lot of really talented creators out there, and I would throw my hand up in the air and say, we're in the mix, but there's lots of people that are a lot better than us, and I know that can technically shoot great stuff and put phenomenal stories together, beautifully written and shot. But I think our niche is knowing the space really well, knowing what's authentic, knowing what cranks the gears of people like us, who are, for lack of a better word, sort of hardcore, hunters that are really fueled by this stuff. It's something that I think that I can maybe pride myself to think like the way that I think. What I think is impactful and meaningful, then hopefully other hunters out there will share the same feeling. Yeah. And so, we try to pride ourselves on having that experience in, the style of media that we're creating, and as well as hopefully being able to create quality content as well.
Yeah, well, that all makes sense. And, when I watch some of your films, on your website, it definitely shines through. And it's very, very clear from looking at those films that they're made and created by somebody who knows what they're doing. And so I want to talk a lot about your background as a hunter, because you've established quite a resume in a relatively short period of time. When I see what you've done, I'm like, I just turned 40. I'm like, man, I hadn't done a damn thing. And so could you just talk a little bit about your kind of life as a hunter? Maybe start with where you grew up, because I know you had an interesting upbringing, kind of surrounded by the outdoors. Can you just talk about that and then kind of lead us through your career as a hunter?
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up west of Calgary, Alberta, which is one of the bigger cities in Alberta. I grew up in a town called Cochrane, and there was about 12,000 people at the time. And we grew up on an acreage with white-tailed deer hanging around the forest, that you can see right outside the window. We had a tree stand, I think probably 100 yards from our house, that either me, my brother, or my dad killed a buck or a doe or both out of every year as kids. And so my dad was a pretty prominent, bow hunting was just a prominent part of his life. He just, there's a great opportunity around the city of Calgary. It's an archery only zone. And there's great access to hunting in the province of Alberta. You can get a mule deer tag, a whitetail tag. A lot of the times, moose and elk are over the counter. You can hunt bighorn sheep in the Rocky Mountains every year in an archery only zone, as well as you can hunt with a bow in the rifle zones up until the end of October. And so there's a lot of hunting just within a 2-hour circle of where I grew up, and really lucky and fortunate to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities, and it quickly evolved into the mountains. And I guess what I mean by that is the first backpack sheep hunt that I went on, I remember I was 14 years old in the Rockies. My dad, I think it was the first weekend of September, I was 14 years old, and threw all our crap on our back, and away we went. And just the challenge and the place that we got to go. I always say that hunting is like a vehicle. It kind of takes you to these places that you wouldn't necessarily always go. I also like to hike with my wife, and mountain bike and cross country skiing, do other stuff outside, but hunting seems to have a knack for taking you physically and mentally to places that you just wouldn't normally go as a normal outdoor enthusiast. And so that part of it quickly became a big part of my life, and a big part of our family too. So I have an older brother, Cameron, who's 2 years older, and like any kid, you kind of grow up wanting to be like your dad and your brother, right? And so they were always hunting. They were hunting together. I was hunting with them, and it just like I never really questioned it. It wasn't really a question of whether or not I was going to do it. And keep in mind, I wasn't forced into it by any means. I just kind of wanted to be with those guys, and so they were great role models. And I never questioned, whether I was going to do it, and to what level I was going to do it. I just followed those guys along, and they sort of forged the path, metaphorically and quite literally, just following their footsteps, trying to keep up to them, while carrying a pack and trying not to pass out. And so that's how I got started, and then just continued doing it. And I went to university out in British Columbia, so the West Coast, in Vancouver, and great hunting opportunity in that province as well. And so had the chance to do some awesome mountain hunts in that province. And really, my dad was just doing, he was coming into a place with his life, both having the time and resources to be able to go on, more and more hunts that he wasn't able to go on as a younger man, and able to tag along with him, to hunt places like the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, for Dall sheep and mountain caribou, and then evolved into where I was able to kind of combine, a passion for hunting with a passion for film and photography, and start this little fledgling career with a guy named Mark Seacat at his company, Seacat Creative, back in 2011. And so was after that for about 6 years. And that took me, again, just really lucky. Life is kind of all about timing. It took me all over the world into some awesome locations to hunt myself, and also to either shoot photos or film. And really thankful for that opportunity that it's led me to where I am today. And then over the last year, my wife Frankie and I have been at it off on our own, and doing the same sort of stuff with a little bit of a twist. I grew up always thinking that I could hopefully be able to find a way to work outside and with either animals or landscapes that I loved. And so I studied environmental science, thinking I would maybe go the academia route, which I quickly learned maybe wasn't the route that I wanted to go. It's just you become so focused in a particular area, it's hard to. I think I mean, like any kid born in the 80s, I guess, sort of a mild dose of ADHD, and like to bounce around and keep things interesting. So I think that I didn't necessarily want to focus on such a particular area, in academia, whether that was, a undergrad, master's, PhD, and go that route. Yeah. And so to bring it back, where I'm heading with this is to bring it back kind of full circle. We've been able to sort of line up our passions and some of my, educational background and, just personal interest really, and get involved in some conservation organizations like the Wild Sheep Foundation and the Rocky Mountain Goat Alliance, and do, projects for those organizations and others, and really find it to be quite exciting and fulfilling, and that be, kind of the cherry on top, that I've just been so lucky to be able to be a part of these things, and do projects I thought, maybe one day I would get to be a part of if I, for example, became a bighorn sheep biologist or something after, many, many years of schooling and experience that I get to be a part of, on the media side. And so, I just, can't say enough things about, all the great people that have led me to where I am, and opportunities they've given me, and great organizations that I've got to work with that, kind of have led me down that path to be where I am today.
Yeah, that's all great. And there's so many things you said in there that I want to ask follow-up questions on. The first one is you mentioned your dad and your brother and the influence they had on you. If you looking back on all those early hunt trips with your dad, is there any one or two lessons that you learned from your dad as a young hunter that have kind of stuck with you or shaped your perspective on hunting for the rest of your life? Can you think back any specific thing comes to mind? Any lessons?
I think that the thing that probably would stand out, and I'm trying to synthesize it in a tightly woven package that it could be put on a bumper sticker or something, which I don't know if I can do.
No, you can ramble for hours on the podcast if you want. So just let it rip.
I'm kind of self-interviewing myself, I feel like. That's great. I think if I had to say, it'd be around the concept of bow hunting being such a low, success rate activity. And by success, I mean, actually punching your tag and harvesting an animal, right?
Yep.
And just embracing the fact that, each day you're going to unzip the tent, you're going to hunt as hard as you can. You're going to go over the next mountain. You're going to keep putting one foot after the other. And that success is just a tiny, tiny part of it. And so I think that, knowing that all these things have to go right. You have to have every star line up. You have to get lucky. You have to get the wind right. The animal has to not see you. You have to make the shot. And he was really good at that. And he was really good at breaking things down into kind of manageable chunks, so to speak. So whether that would be like a 7 to 10 day hunt, or even a 3-day hunt, and just saying, okay, I got a 3-day hunt. I'm going to bust out of work. I got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I'm going to say, okay, here's the plan. Friday morning, we're getting up. We're going to go here. We're going to glass for a few hours, and then we're going to hit our next spot, and we're going to hit our next spot. And having that mental fortitude, it sounds really simple, but it kind of goes a long way. And some of the best hunters that I've gotten to know have kind of confirmed this, that you have this plan, and of course it's going to change 100 times, right? But the fact that you have a plan, you're working within this sort of, game plan that you've drawn up, yep. And you can keep yourself in the game. You can keep saying, okay, well, if I don't see anything here, I'm going here. If this doesn't work out, I'm going here. If I get weathered in, I'm hunkering down. And you can just sort of mechanically move through the hunt, because it is such a journey, and you need to be out there to get lucky, and you need to be out there to have all the stars line up. And so he was really good at breaking those down. I know he always said, a 10-day hunt, you're going to lose a day to weather, right? Always in the mountains, at least. So you got 3-day hunts. Now you have a 3-day hunt, and it's just really manageable to just think about, okay, 3 days at a time. Okay. And not sort of ride the roller coaster of, oh God, we found a huge ram. Okay. No, then we lost him. Oh man, this is the worst hunt ever. Or we haven't seen anything, and then we see something, and then the weather rolls in, and riding those ups and downs. And so he always said, if you can hunt as hard on the first day of a hunt, if you can hunt as hard on that day as, you do on your last day, and if you can just kind of consistently keep hunting hard all the way through, things are going to line up. And just knowing that's how bow hunting is, and just embracing that, sort of quest. And I think you can think about that on a short hunt, a medium hunt, a long hunt, or, really in life. And over the number of years, maybe you think about hunting bighorn sheep with your bow, and you say, okay, I'm gonna try and dedicate, next 10 years of my life to this, or have it be a significant part of my life. And so a lot of people, the old time sheep hunters say, the year you start bow hunting sheep is the year your ram is born. And if you're killing a 8 to 10 year old ram and you start hunting it, it might be 8 to 10 years. And that's very, I think that's an interesting way to think about it, and know that this is just a long-term quest. And, we kind of live in this society of instant gratification, and access to information is it's so available, and we see people being so successful, relatively, I guess what I'm driving at is, you see somebody on social media that's been lucky enough to harvest this animal. You see the kill photo, but you don't see everything that went into it, or how many times they failed, how many years they have of not filling that tag. And so it's so, I think, it's just trying to, ground yourself in this, hey, this is a quest. This is a long-term quest, and you're doing it for, your own personal reason. And, that mental fortitude of riding out the highs and lows, and just being along, for that process was something that he was really good at. And then my brother is just phenomenal at. He's kind of taken it a step further. and just really been able to say, okay, here's the plan. And that could be a season plan. That could be, he starts now pretty much, and, we're in mid-May, and, thinking about new trailheads and it's just really cool to see the gears turning, but it's having that long-term plan, and he's really not fazed by, oh, we didn't see anything here. And I've just seen a lot of, and I've done it myself, and I've totally done it myself, but you go out, you feel really good about an area, you don't see anything, and you kind of get knocked down a peg. And then you go somewhere else, and you don't see anything again. And you start to, the demons start to talk to you.
Sure.
And, so I guess, I don't know how you'd fit that on a bumper sticker, but that's the lesson that I was sort of driving at, in that you got to kind of think about it in a long-term way, have a plan, stick to it. And don't be afraid to not stick to it. But
sure,
that's what I was driving at.
How about this for a bumper sticker? Process over goals. How about that? Is that decent? Because I think it sounds, it's interesting what you're saying, because I know that, or I read online, and it could be, correct me if I'm wrong, but that you were the youngest person to ever get all 4 species of bighorn sheep. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was true at the time. Yeah.
And so, I would think that is, I'm sure you in a way were focused on that goal, but at the same time you had to balance out the process, because even though I live in Colorado, I love to surf. And the thing about surfing is that actual riding the wave is maybe 1% of the whole deal when you're out there. And it sounds like It's this similar deal on these hunts. I mean, the hard work, the weeks and weeks or months and months of planning, the training, all the hours and hundreds of thousands of hours you put into, practicing with your bow, the years of experience, it all comes together to that one moment when you take the shot. And that's the kind of this really minuscule part. And so, it almost seems like you have to really value the process over just the end goal of getting your animal. And so my question with that is, when you had gotten 3 out of the 4 species of sheep, did you ever just kind of get overly focused on the goal and like, all right, I just got to get this thing and get impatient? Or were you able, at that point, you had enough experience to be like, all right, I just need to focus on process, and it'll work out if it works out?
Yeah, I think I did. And I think that I did try to do that, and try to level the stakes down to just, this is any other hunt that I've been, lucky enough to do, and just go through the same sort of process. And it's, I guess that's one thing that I really draws me into hunting, is that, it's a pretty level playing field. And what I mean by that is you can have a lot of experience. You can have, be able to, draw great tags or book guided hunts, or, live in a place where, there's great hunting opportunity. But regardless, there's a wild animal out there that's really good at staying alive, that lives in rugged terrain, that is going to challenge you in every way, and has the senses that are far superior to any human. And what draws me to hunting is that you can have all this experience. However, you still get out there, lace your boot up one, boot at a time, and then you still have to go sort of mano a mano with these animals, and most of the time you're losing, and that's what keeps me coming back, and I think keeps a lot of bow hunters coming back, is that it is that fact that you're not successful all the time, but that you are always pursuing it.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the ranch brokerage business, and so I sell a lot of these really big, private properties to some pretty wealthy people. And, some of these people, hopefully none of them are listening, but some of them share your focus on the challenge of it. And then there's another side that it's almost just like bragging rights. Like they want people to know they paid 60 grand for a sheep tag, and then they want to have a guy take them out there and they shoot it from, with a rifle from a far distance. And they've got this kind of bragging rights things where it sounds like with you're trying to challenge yourself in the biggest way possible. I mean, first of all, you're doing with a bow, which is, first of all, you choose to go after sheep, which is challenging. Then you choose to do that with a bow. And then you'll go out on these long adventures that even if you weren't hunting, if you were just backpacking for fun, it would be a massive adventure in its own right. So where do you think that came from in your personality to kind of go after these extremely challenging, take on these extreme challenges versus kind of doing things the easy way? Is that something your dad taught you, or are you just kind of wired that way?
I would probably say a little bit of both. I think that I was going with earlier in the podcast talking about that, following these guys' footsteps. And at that age, 12, 13, 14, 15, you are so malleable in your surroundings. And on one hand, I was following in their footsteps, and I was, wanting to live up to the example that both those guys had set. And then on the other hand, it was, dripping into my blood as well. And having that little adventure bug bite you and have that feeling be just really hard to replicate, in other activities. You just don't get that level of uncertainty, that level of challenge, that level of, I think it is uncertainty. You don't know what is going to happen next. And so I would say it has to be a pretty even split with my the examples that I had in front of me, and didn't really think twice about doing this stuff, and then also finding it to be something that I was really interested in wanting to come back to.
And speaking of influences, do you have any, your family's obviously a big influence, but are there any people like you've read about, or authors or historical figures, anybody like that have kind of influenced you? Like, for example, I'm weirdly obsessed with Theodore Roosevelt, as a lot of people out in the West are, but, is there anybody like that in your mind that has kind of set an example, even though you may not know him personally?
Yeah, I think that I throw it back to even a lot of the guys that are no longer with us. And I had, and some of them are, I shouldn't say that, but I think of kind of classic Alberta sheep hunting guys. Like there's an author who's, interestingly enough, is more of or equal parts hunting outfitter, equal parts sort of naturalist and photographer, but way back in I believe between the 30s to the 50s in southern Alberta, a guy named Andy Russell, and he's written a few books that are among some of my favorite hunting books. But he was one of the first guys to see, a landscape change through different resource extraction programs that were happening, and hunting, be impacted by that. And so he took it upon himself to take photography gear into the mountains while he was doing these outfitting trips or scouting in the summer. And he just has a great set of books. Horns in the High Country is one of my favorites, but for a couple of reasons. And one of them is because, of course, it's in the Rockies of Alberta, but also his vision at the time when he wrote it was that what's happening here from a industrial perspective is changing the way that these animals move, and is changing the way that I get to experience the wilderness. And he was able to write about that really eloquently, and not really have a strong position on it, but just, he made those observations. He made those observations with his camera gear, which, if you think about it, 70 years ago compared to what's available as far as photography and film equipment now, it's just astounding that he would, take that stuff into the field, and rolls of film. He talks about rolls of film and these expeditions, and shooting a mule deer for meat to continue on his quest of filming. And anyways, so back to your question, that throwback guy or gal that did it, old school horse train, just tougher than anybody that I know, and doing it with jeans and flannel and wall tents and just not the level of equipment and technology that's available out there. You just know that they had some rough nights on the mountain. So I like that side of it and that literature. And then, as a kid had Life at Full Draw by Chuck Adams under my bed. We had a hard copy of that. And then the other one was Cam Haines. I believe his first book was Backcountry Bow Hunting.
Okay.
I think it was something like that. 2 hard copies under my bed. And, just reading about, Chuck had his quest for the North American 29 and just adventure bow hunting at a time that a lot of people, just weren't attempting a lot of those hunts. And so that was really interesting to me. And then a lot of great friends over the years that have made, that we look up to that are a little bit longer in the teeth, but guys like Jack Frost, who, had the first Grand Slam of the bow, and Tom Hoffman, who was right after him. And just hearing the coolest thing about visiting with those guys, and you'll go to the Wild Sheep Foundation and sit down at a table and there'll be an empty seat and you'll look over and, oh, there's Jack Frost and there's Tom Hoffman. And these guys have done it. Right. And they're so open and willing and interested in chatting with you and sharing stories. And as those stories start to come to the surface, the coolest thing that I've been just so lucky to be able to do is hunt some of the same areas and hearing about, Alberta in the 80s, hunting in November for bighorn sheep with a bow and hearing some of those stories and saying, yeah, I've been on that mountain. I've been to that trailhead, and thinking about these guys were doing it before I was even born, and doing it without rangefinders and, without any quality equipment. I always think it's just cool to be, you're a thread in a greater fabric of history, and a very small thread, but you feel really a part of that. And when you get to hunt some of those places, and even just on a broader scope, you feel a part of that, what it is to be human, in that you're hunting as a hunter, maybe differently than they did it, hundreds of years ago, but it's still the same basic concept.
Yeah, I love history personally, and I for a lot of the same reasons you just said. I think if you read any history about, specifically like the West, it just is humbling because of how damn tough those people were. And no matter what I do or how, if I ever start feeling like, hey, maybe I'm kind of tough, all you have to do is read a history book and you realize you're not. But then it also makes experiences richer. Like you mentioned, you go to these areas and that, some of these old school guys that hunted there, and you're part of that. And, I can't recommend people reading history enough, because on so many levels, it just makes things more, it checks the ego and makes experiences more rich, which is always good.
Totally agree.
So at age 24, you had taken all 4 species with a bow, and that's a huge deal. And so what do you look for now? Because I would imagine, obviously you're focused more on process than goals, but you've kind of pretty early on checked off a lot of the things that people spend, their life trying to accomplish. So now when you go on a hunt, what is your goal? I mean, what are you looking for in an animal? Even though you shouldn't have goals, it's all process. We can have a disclaimer there.
And keeping in mind too, the to use the word accolade or achievement or goal, that's one thing that I've been super lucky to be able to do. But it really just started out as, hey, I'm going hunting with my dad and brother, and that's what those guys are doing. That's what I want to do, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's evolved, and I've been really lucky to hunt with some just fantastic people. And I was talking about this the other day, but just how hunting spurs on and forges such strong, a lot of the time, lifelong friendships. And so that has been such a huge part of hunting to me, is trying to do it with people that I either want to get to know or happen to have the stars align to be able to share a trip together. And so that's something that I look for in weighing what I may or may not be doing.
Mm-hmm.
We're all limited on time. We only get so many days and so many hunting seasons before we can't do it anymore. And the people component and the way that hunting brings you to interesting people is something that it just keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. And we just got back from Patagonia hunting red stag down there and doing a film project and shooting a bunch of photos on the hunting and fishing and wing shooting side of things. But just a couple of friends that we've met down there that they really are some of the most generous people. They'll give you the shirt off their back. They'll want you to come and travel and stay and see their culture and eat their food and go hunting with them and stay as long as you want and give you a bed and really roll out the red carpet. It's just phenomenal. And I think that I don't personally know of a activity like that has such a common language. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen that happen, whether going over to Spain and hunting with a friend over there, or go down to Argentina or New Zealand or Alaska or wherever. You meet all these people and you just have such an unspoken commonality as a hunter, and especially bow hunting. And so that's such a part of it. And so I'm off base on your question a little bit of what am I looking for now, but
no, that makes sense.
It does. I mean, an animal sitting on your wall or the meat in the freezer and whether it's a 39-inch ram or a 40-inch ram or all those things are all great little goals to have and great outcomes of the process. But really they're just reminders, and they're just reminders of that time that you shared with those people. And sometimes if it is by yourself, you're doing a solo hunt, it's a reminder of what you went through. And I think, again, hunting just brings that out in you and your relationships. And also you just go into the mountains one way and you never come out the same person. It's always changing you and evolving you and pushing you. And even if it's just 10 days that you had to go out there and think, it changes you. And so, those are all parts of the puzzle. And it honestly has become a little bit less about the animal. And I think that, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just been such a gift to be able to have this activity, this passion, this hobby, whatever you want to call it, draw me in and take me to these places to meet these people, to experience things that it just wouldn't normally have done and looked up, on a travel website and said, I'm going to go to Argentina and go on this trip. It's drinking mate, which is it's a herbal drink they drink in South America.
Yep.
It's like a really strong tea, and it's drinking mate with a gaucho in a tin shack who's lived his whole life there and looks over this estancia after all the sheep and cows and doesn't speak English, but going in there and watching him boil the water on his open fire and roll up a cigarette and sit there and visit with him in my horrible broken Spanish.
I know the feeling.
Right. And seeing those things that you just wouldn't see, and you just get off the beaten path in such a way, in a literal way, and in just a emotional and spiritual way as well, that I just can't quite think of another thing quite like it.
Do you think that hunting taps into some part of your DNA, part of our human DNA that just isn't really tapped into nowadays? Because I'm not a massive big game hunter. I'd love to do more and more of it, but I do a lot of reading about natural history, and I just really feel like it's in our DNA. And you mentioned these relationships you form with people, and I don't think that's just by chance. I mean, I think you're out there doing something that we're meant to do as a species, and that we've done for tens and tens and tens, hundreds of thousands of years, and you're just tapping into that. I mean, does that sound crazy, or do you agree?
100% agree.
Yeah.
And the occurrence that really cemented that for me was over the last few years, and I should have mentioned too, one of the really nice gifts that has been given back to me in terms of hunting is being able to help people get involved in hunting, especially bow hunting, and seeing people, close friends, go from not being able to draw a bow back to, hitting bullseyes and hopefully being with them when they harvest their first animal with a bow. That part of it has just been so cool. And I think that concept of we are meant to do this has really exposed itself to me, in that I go hunting with these people, and to watch them move about the forest and yeah, I always tell them, they're asking how do I know when to draw my bow or when to take a step, or what do I, trying to like wrap their mind around this, if this happens, what do I do? When really there is an element of experience, no question, but there is such a level of follow your instincts.
That's cool.
Follow your gut, and to see them, the light bulb go off, and that it's kind of giving me goosebumps right now, but to see that happen and witness firsthand that, hey, your instincts are probably right 9 times out of 10. And so I can tell you exactly what to do. However, everything's going to change as soon as that bull bugles and takes 5 steps to the right. And now all the chips are on the table, and you either have to draw your bow or you have to stand there frozen and let them walk out of your life. And if you make those mistakes, they will haunt you into not making them again. And that is another part of it that's just such a cool thing to see happen. And so I think you're absolutely right at it, in that is a part of our DNA, and that people that try it for the first time and go, oh man, I'm just never going to be able to figure it out, or I didn't grow up doing it. My dad didn't do it, and I haven't been able to hunt sheep since I was 14 years old and go on all these hunts. You're actually better equipped than you think, and that just comes with, hundreds of thousands of years of people running all over the place and chasing things. And so I think I've really seen it, and I do believe it.
Yeah, and I think that team aspect is huge, because you think of us as a species, we're not that strong. I mean, we're relatively weak, but our biggest one of our biggest advantages is that we can team up, and so that probably accounts for how you form these really close bonds with these people very, very quickly. Because otherwise, I mean, in the old days, you had to do it as a team. There wasn't any sort of, there were very few solo hunters back then, I would guess. So I love that kind of stuff. I could read books about that all day. So for somebody who is relatively new to hunting or wants to get into hunting, but doesn't really know anybody that does it, doesn't have any, family members that have done it over the years. I mean, what would be your advice to somebody? The reason I ask is because I was actually emailing with somebody who listens to the podcast who was asking that same kind of question. And so what would be your advice to somebody like that?
I think we have a lot of access to information with the internet, with forums, with Google Earth, to be able to go in there and e-scout and learn mountains and all that access to information, which is a huge positive. And I think that I would definitely recommend tapping into those resources. But I would also recommend there's no substitute for experience and trying and failing on your own. And so if you think that there's a time that you want to start bow hunting or hunting, the time is right now to do it. And so the recommendation that I would make is just like any other activity that you're trying to learn how to do, is just start it. The first step is starting it. The first step is rolling down to the archery shop, making that uncomfortable introduction and saying, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please, give me the 10-cent tour and help me start this thing. And be careful, because you're entering into a territory that you can't really get out of. You're going to go in and start, you're going to draw a bow back and shoot an arrow and go, oh wow, this is pretty damn cool. And you're not going to be able to go back to whatever you did with all your weekends, vacation time, and disposable income from August 1st to December 1st. So I would warn you with that caveat. But
no more golf.
That's right. It's over. No, I think let me synthesize this down. I think there's a lot of great people out there. There's a lot of just really warm folks that want to help share what they've been able to do with you, or get you off to the races in the right way. And so I would say get involved in however you can get involved. Go to your local archery shop and establish a relationship there. Join the 3D league. Take some lessons. Really get involved on a community level. And on the other side of the coin, there's fantastic conservation organizations probably in your area that are doing, banquets and pint nights and all these great gathering events, such as the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. It seems like is just exploding. Wild Sheep Foundation, Elk Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, whatever the area that you live in that might have one of those agencies in place, get involved in it, and you'll just meet people that are so much more willing to help or have a conversation with you than you actually think. And so I think if I'm making a recommendation, it would be getting involved on that level, because I think there is so much information on the internet that it can be overwhelming, and it's hard to start. And so I think it comes with that level of finding the mentor or the guide, metaphorically, that can shepherd you through how to synthesize all this information overload and get it started. And people are willing to help.
Yeah, and I think the work that you're doing, and guys like Charles Post and Tyler Sharp with Modern Huntsman, I think that kind of changing the historical image of hunting, for probably the last 50 years or 50 years up until about 10 years ago, hunting, I think, had been seen as kind of a thing for middle-aged white guys to do. But because of the film and photography work that you're doing, and you contribute to Modern Huntsman and creating this new image of what it really is like, or what it's like now, and it's a much more welcoming environment, I think, and it's much more open, and I think that's very accurate. And so I'm just glad guys like you are out there doing that, because it's a real service, and it's drawing people in. I mean, I know Tyler gets constant messages from people who've read Modern Huntsman and want to get involved in some way. So
that's awesome.
Your article and photos in Modern Huntsman were really awesome, by the way. I love those.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for the kind words and associating me with those two guys. I'm proud to be a part of the team. If I'm even on the bench or filling up the water bottles, I'll be on the team with those guys.
You're definitely on the team, man. So speaking of conservation, I want to talk a little bit about that, because I do some work in land conservation, and most of mine is on private land. But, obviously a lot of these working ranches and big private landscapes depend on public lands in one way or the other. So could you just talk a little bit about, what public lands, specifically, I guess here in the U.S. have meant to you over your, in your hunting and in your work, and kind of the importance of protecting those places?
For sure. I think that it has been said a million times, but it's the greatest resource that the country has, and being a Canadian and living in Canada, same goes for us. It's classified a little bit differently, but it is something that everybody can take advantage of. And I think that because the landscape that we're in and that we've been in, it is getting harder and harder for people to sort of break away from a reality that is maybe augmented, or experiences that are highly focused on technology and a computer screen or a phone, or anything that isn't what's outside. And so public lands are that stronghold, are that foundation for anybody to be able to go do whatever it is that you want to do. And it's such a just an integral part of being able to say that, as a child, as a middle-aged person, as an older person, throughout their life, you can continue to always go back to those public places and have those experiences that are going to make you want to protect it and they're going to make you want to be involved. And so I think it's a feedback loop that perpetuates itself. And that's what's happened for me. It's the more that you experience it for yourself, the more that you want to and be a part of it. And so I think that, I think I'm trying to, it's kind of a hard thing to kind of put your finger on and say, this is what it means to me, but it is such a, it's such a big part of all the cool shit that I've gotten to do. I mean, really, it wouldn't happen without it, on the hunting side and the filming side. And so, I really think that, it's just crucial. And I think it's going to be, I maybe spent too much time thinking about this stuff lately, but I think it's going to be a huge part of this next generation that, like I mentioned before, there's kids growing up now that have never not, lived with access to a smartphone.
That's crazy.
Or an iPad, or that's what's happening. That's the generation that's coming up. And so, for me, having the ability to say, hey, you can go out, hopefully minutes from your house, if not, a little bit more, and breathe in fresh air and hopefully see some animals or some plant life, that's going to make you think about, this great big wide universe and world that an adventure that we call life in a more meaningful way than you will ever get, by the warm glow of your iPhone 10. And so that's just a big part of it, I think, now and really moving forward into the future.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. And I just finished a book a few weeks ago called The Nature Fix. It's by an author named Florence Williams, and she kind of goes through and explains all the scientific research about why being outdoors is so good for you. And I enjoyed it because I already knew that, but I didn't have all the scientific backup to prove it. But it's really, right, for people who are interested in that, I think it's a great book to read. And I think it's more and more important nowadays with, like you said, with all this technology. It's just insane. One more question about conservation, and if you don't want to answer it, we can edit this out, but I'm sure you've thought about it. But what are your thoughts on the reintroduction of wolves? I know that's a controversial subject, and it historically, as hunters have not been on board, or as a group have not been on board with the reintroduction of wolves because of elk populations, at least here in the U.S. What have you thought at all about that? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I've just thought about it a fair amount. I think I'm not super educated on every side of the issue, but I think, to speak a little bit about perhaps my own personal thoughts, I think that we live in you can't separate wild animals from people. You just can't. We share the same habitat. We share the same landscape. We share the same resources. We have ranches where elk live, and it's just so hard to just delineate and say, okay, we're going to package up this thing called wilderness and put it in a box and not have the spillover effects, which is actually happening because people are continuing to expand further and further into these wilderness areas. And so, I think that the reintroduction of wolves is an issue that comes from trying to have an apex predator back in the ecosystem. And in Yellowstone, it's unchecked. Obviously, no hunting in the park. And the other thing is, these wolves are hard to hunt. Wolves are the reason that they've been able to get knocked back to at-risk levels is because by and large, probably the ranching community and other people have been able to trap and poison and hunt them at a level of exterminating them. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a population that is hard to hunt by a traditional standpoint, has a litter of pups, not like an elk calf will have one or two calves at the very most. You can have these populations of wolves just exploding and relatively unchecked. And so it's just a different ballgame. And I think that I'm for wolves being a part of an ecosystem that is hopefully as close to natural as it was before people showed up. But the reality is that it's never going to be quote unquote natural, because humans are irrevocably impacting the landscape and the animals. And so I think having a comprehensive management program for wolves is something that's still really challenging because of the challenges that I mentioned in terms of, you just can't issue X number of hunting permits for wolves and expect a return and a harvest rate similar to ungulates. Ungulates are prey species that are adapted to be have a different set of skills, and apex predators are highly intelligent and good at staying alive and really adaptable to hunting pressure. And so I think that overall, I know that there's a restorative approach with wolves that has a net positive in terms of the long term. Sorry, my phone's in here. In terms of the long-term balance of an ecosystem and moving those prey species like, elk, and back when bison were more prevalent in the American West, moving them around and keeping them from absolutely decimating water sources and all the young foliage and willows and birch trees and poplars around that water source, and maybe beating it into a point where it's no longer a water source. So I know that's one example of the net positive of animals like wolves is having that movement of restoring that population to be more of a natural prey species that continues to roam around and be moved around and spread out the pressure of their feeding cycle on all the things that they eat. And so I think that there is a balance there, and I think that we just haven't figured out what that is and haven't been able to manage them, in an effective way. And so I think that that's probably where a lot of the backlash and the, wolves smoke a pack a day and that sort of mentality comes from the hunting community. Mm-hmm. And I think that remains to be seen how that all sort of shakes out. And I understand that if you're making your living in the cattle business, or you have a Dall sheep area in the Northwest Territories, and every wolf is going to, every single pack of wolves that you see walking around, that they might eat a sheep a week or whatever the stat is, that's a potentially a $20,000 sheep that is coming out of your bottom line, and you're a steward of the landscape, but you're also running a business. And I guess I realize that there's just a juxtaposition in terms of that person or group that perhaps wants it to be a more balanced ecosystem with apex predators, but also there's a bottom line and there's a financial impact. And so it's a challenging issue. And I guess I would say, it's going to kind of come to fruition, I hope, with a more comprehensive management plan that's well thought out and is actually effective, because I think it's just challenging to consider. It's not apples to apples when you're comparing ungulate species to wolves in terms of hunter impact and hunter harvest.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that, because it's definitely a hot issue, and it, for some reason, it can really set people off. But I think the only way to find a solution that first of all, there is no right answer. I think it's a challenging issue, and there's a big gray area in there. But the only way to figure out anything is to talk about it. And so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. I know you've got a million things going on, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I have some kind of quick questions that I run through with most of my guests, and it's been fun to compare the answers. And so can I run through those with you real quick, and then I'll let you get back to your day?
Oh, please do.
Cool. So what are your favorite books related to the West? And it can be the American West, the Canadian Rockies, or just favorite books in general, any books that have influenced your life in a positive way.
Oh, mentioned it earlier, that Horns in the High Country, Andy Russell, probably lesser known, awesome book. Geez, I always, it's funny. It's popped up a lot in my lifetime. There's a book called The Alchemist, which isn't a hunting book, but it's and it's pretty special and important to us. And anyone that is a close friend has probably heard us reference it or maybe received a copy from us. Then, what else? Maybe related back to hunting. I started getting into the old Africa books, the Capstick, Death in the Long Grass and Death in the Silent Places, and those books, just because it's so different, just thinking about hunting man-eating lions and leopards in Brazil with a spear and, Siberian tigers and tigers in India that have killed 400 or 500 people. That side of it and his writing style is just so, it is similar to what we referenced earlier. Just people were just way tougher.
Yep.
Back then. So I've liked that. And, I probably the kick, I guess, that I've been on lately in terms of books has been more up the, self-improvement and sort of business, not even business, but just life, goal-oriented books that are trying to make you be your best self and a better person. So I'm sure I would be remiss not to mention a pretty popular author named Tim Ferriss, who's coming out with a lot of books about different successful people. And I guess I like that stuff, and it's maybe a bit hokey, and I know some people are like, Tim's kind of got his way, but I guess he just does a really good job because of his following that he's built to be able to just get interesting people. So that's what I'm after, is not necessarily the author and his perspective, even though he's been highly successful. It's just a guest that he's able to get. So I like his podcast and like his books.
I do too. I mean, and I think he rubs people the wrong way every now and then. Yeah. Just something about the way he talks. I don't know, but I really, if it weren't for Tim Ferriss, I doubt that I would have this podcast, because I listened to his so much. And I thought, I bet I could do something like that. And I meet all these interesting people through my work. And, so a lot of these questions I ask at the end, they're a direct ripoff from Tim Ferriss. But he's great.
No, that's great. No, I love it. I thought that maybe, you'd and I love the podcast format too. And I think that it's nice. You have some flexibility and just some foundational stuff to go back to. And so, hats off. You're an awesome, if you can pull some sort of semblance of coherenceness out of the last hour that I've been talking, then you're a fantastic podcast.
No, this is awesome. So you're obviously a filmmaker. Are there any films or documentaries that have been impactful to you that you really love?
We really like this series called Chef's Table, and it brings out the unique human stories of chefs who are super competitive and just type A and wired in a very unique way. And to see their story and the human element of what they've done, and just the level of photography that they've been able to achieve, showing, everybody just likes watching awesome food shows too. So there's that element to it, but they did a good job of bringing to light these like interesting human stories. So we've been consuming that, and it kind of influenced us, like how to dig the next little layer deeper in terms of film and story.
Yeah, chefs are crazy as hell. They're like lunatic artists, and they're very, very, very interesting people. And I'm not a foodie or anything like that, but if I ever hear interviews with chefs like on podcasts, I'll listen every time, because they're such interesting people. And I would never have expected I would say something like that a few years ago, but I'm completely on board. You can learn a lot from those people, I think.
Absolutely, and super artistic from the creative side, and then also just a diligent level of there's just so much work that goes into developing that craft and being able to build something that you have this creative side, and then you have this cool business sort of leadership side of it, being able to build this, because, it's one thing if he or she's a great chef, but if they can't have the opportunity to develop a platform or a restaurant or a food truck that's successful when 80 or 90% of these things fail within the first year or two, then nobody gets to eat their food except their family. So that side of it is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a tough business. I used to do commercial real estate, and the stat was that one out of 10 restaurants will still be open after 18 months. And
Wow.
So just being able to lease a space for a restaurant is a huge challenge. So what is the most powerful experience you've ever had in the outdoors? And that could be a scary experience. It could be a funny experience, just a memorable experience. You've had so many, I would guess it's hard to choose one, but is there one kind of powerful experience that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, so many. I would say. I think. Well, I'll tell one just because it's recent memory, and it was on a solo hunt. I was doing a sheep hunt in the late season, and it was actually in the unlimited units in Montana, which are over the counter sheep units, but they come with a catch that once the quota's filled, the season's closed. So you have to call in every 24 hours and check and make sure the quota is still open, or the unit that you're hunting is still open.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that it works is there's just such low densities of sheep, and so they can keep it knowing that they might harvest 1, 2, or 3 rams in a very small population, but these sheep are sprinkled throughout the Beartooth Mountains. That a large majority of it is over 10,000 feet, and comes with a host of challenges when you're doing it in mid to late November. And I was back by myself and snowshoeing around on top of this mountain, and I had this hunt plan, or I was going to go back and check these spots, and didn't end up seeing anything, which is about par for the course. And so I was coming out, and I tried to take a little shortcut and walk off the spine, and it was just really, it was basically about, if you put your 2 feet together, it was about 2 boots wide, I guess. Maybe it was about a foot wide, this little spine. And I was actually following these goat tracks. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, if these goats can do it, I can do it, which is definitely not a theory that you should apply. But I was following this spine, and it changed from solid ground to just stacked rocks with snow on top of it. So you couldn't really tell if it was solid ground or just snow built up between a few rocks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's kind of coming down, and it was getting dark, and I was right at that point where I've gone down far enough where I'm asking myself, okay, am I going to turn around and climb up and go around the way I should have gone, which is the way that I hiked in, or am I going to try and cheat my way and take this little shortcut? And I was riding this ridge, cowboy style, if you want to call it that. It was just, it kind of scared myself to the point of I was sitting on top of it and kind of putting my hands out in front and shuffling my butt.
Oh yeah, I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, one little shuffle at a time, and I was starting to punch through some of those snow pockets, and I was really kind of scared because I'd gotten myself to that point where, oh man, if I go down this next little pitch, I don't know if I can come back up. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this ridge just totally drops off. It's getting dark. I can't camp here. And so I had this little bit of a moment of panic, and I just tried to steady myself and think about what to do. And I ended up packing up and turning around and just climbing out of there and getting back on top and going, holy shit, I kind of really scared myself there, especially by myself.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, hopefully my wife never listens to this, but it was serious drop off on both sides. And I guess I'm not really an adrenaline junkie. I don't jump out of planes or jump off cliffs when I go snowboarding. I just cruise the groomers and drink beer at the end of the day. But that was a pretty cool experience, just pushing yourself a little bit and then coming back. And on the way out, the story goes on and on, but I ended up throwing my headlamp on, hike up the normal way, and I kind of came around this corner, and I was following the same footsteps that I had taken on the way in.
Yeah.
And I'm just, your headlamp's down, you're looking at the footsteps, you're just trudging along going, oh man, it's going to be another, 6 or 7 hours to get the hell out of here. And It's Sunday night and I'm over it. And watching my footsteps, all of a sudden my footsteps disappear and I kind of pan up to this big basin. And I realized that the reason my footsteps are no longer there, this huge avalanche had totally ripped in the time that I'd climbed up and gone over the next mountain, which was probably 3 days or 2.5 days earlier. This huge avalanche, and I wasn't obviously there when the avalanche happened, but I could see my foot tracks wiped out over there from 2 or 3 days earlier. I think about 3 days, and so that was another little, and that happened within 2 hours of caboing down this ridge, and so I was like, oh man, that's okay, cool. I'm gonna not go this way and go back around, and end up trucking out all the way out, getting back to the trail, and have that little adrenaline pump of okay, I made it out. And I remember getting back to my truck, and it's late, and I ended up having a flat tire in my truck when I got back.
Oh man!
So I must have had a slow leak or something in it. And so I guess why that story is meaningful is not an epic conquering of the mountain and epic story of success, but it jumped into my mind as a meaningful experience in the last couple of years, because it was just a reminder of we're only on this earth for so long, and at any moment all this can be taken away from me or anybody. And so it was really cool to be driving back and going, okay, that was a couple of close calls, all within a short amount of time. And one, I need to be careful and mitigate risk as best I can, which I always tell people to do. Doing different gear seminars and tips about backcountry hunting. I always carry a Delorme inReach in my left-hand waist belt pocket of my pack, and I always carry a quick clot, which is like a military designed sort of this like fast rip package that you can quickly duct tape with the duct tape on your trekking pole around a wound or something like that, in my other waist belt pocket. And so my wife and family knows if worse comes to worse, I fall and I puncture my femoral artery, or I break a leg, or slice myself with a knife, I'm hitting that SOS, and I've got some ability to triage some of the wound that I might have, and they know that, so that gives them peace of mind, and that gives me peace of mind. But so number one was, reminding myself that I need to be careful out there, and also number two, hunting, as in life, there is no way of predicting what's going to happen next, and we don't know when this is all going to end. And so to try to just really, really make the most of it and live it up, in the sense that, it's just a gift to be out there. It's just a gift to be in the mountains. And so I think that, I guess at the time, that hunt is really hard, and you just don't see a lot of animals. And I was kind of, maybe I was grumbling a bit to myself, going, okay, I want to get out of here. I'm over it. And I came down that ridge and had that little scare, and then turned myself around, and then saw the avalanche, and then maybe the flat tire was like the last little bit of the universe, hitting me over the head, in case I didn't get it the first two times, but to say, hey, you're actually really lucky to be able-bodied and have the time and job and resources to be able to go do these things. So, you better fucking enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so, that was just, super meaningful. And I think that there's little reminders like that all the time. And, maybe when you're hunting in the mountains, there's more, or you're more receptive to them. I'm not really sure, but I do believe that, that the signs or the omens are out there if you kind of have your eyes and ears perked up to just those moments to remember that we're all pretty lucky to be able to do this stuff.
I think that's awesome advice, and very, very wise to be able to find that, meaningful advice out of just kind of not just these super intense experiences, but I mean that was obviously the one you described as intense, but being able to pull those out of daily experiences, that's the key to life, I think. Well, thank you so much for taking all the time. How can people connect with you online?
So I'm on Instagram, just my last name, which is Foss, Foss, man, just how it sounds, then number 8. So Fossman8 is my Instagram handle, kind of keep up to date of what I'm up to, hunting, fishing, and media-wise. And then our website is foss.media, no .com, just foss.media. So usually updating different projects that we're working on there a little bit, or you can just see what we're up to. But trying to keep the social media beast fed, I guess, but also not try to spend too much time on it. I'm not as active. I try to update the photography as much as I can, but try not to devote too much of my life of with that stuff. But always love getting messages and emails from people asking gear questions, hunting tips, sharing stories, sending pictures. Have been it's just such a lucky thing sometimes that people say, "Hey, I listened to your podcast and it was awesome, and I have this question," or just "Hey, thumbs up, thanks, love your stuff, and keep it up." It's just really cool, and I appreciate that so much too. So you can find me there, and if you see me at the sheep show or a trailhead, if you want, I'll buy you a beer and we can share it and tell some hunting stories.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and thanks for listening to that particular episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Before you go, I've got 3 quick things. Number 1, if you like the podcast, please do me a huge favor. Either pass it along to a friend who may be interested, share it on your social media, or go to iTunes and give it a 5-star review. All those things would mean a lot to me, and they would really help to spread the word about the podcast. Number 2, if you've listened to many of these episodes, you know that I love reading and I love talking about books. Every other month, I send out a quick email with a few books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The subjects are varied, but they're pretty much all nonfiction with an emphasis on history, biographies, adventure narratives, and topics related to the American West. There are no sales pitches for ranches, no spam, no other kind of nonsense, just books. So if you'd like to sign up for the list, head to Mountain and Prairie/reading, or just go to Mountain and Prairie and there's a massive tab at the top that says book recommendations. Click on it. There are a ton of good books that I've read. Some of the old email lists are on there. You can go crazy. There are a lot of books. And finally, if you know anyone I should interview for the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All my contact info is at mountainandprairie.com, and I'm on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to have some recommendations and suggestions of interesting people I should meet. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.